Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Daniele Menzi. Um, I'm showcasing from my beautiful place in the eternal city, that is Rome, Italy. I'm forced to be at home, as anyone in lockdown, for the joy of my family. So I'm very, very happy to be here to chair a session surrounding blockchain. We talk much more about the decentralized world. And obviously, we want to see the world from a telco angle point of view. And I'm so happy to introduce my guests to this session, which are Tim Vasco and Keith Bowie. I will let them to introduce themselves, but I'm so happy they can join this because we have no PowerPoint, we have no slides to show, just us talking, brainstorming, and hopefully to give perspective on something that perhaps you never heard before. So thank Tim and Keith to join me to this session.
Thank you, Daniele. It's great to be here.
Hey, how you doing, guys? So you're on the other side of the world, right?
Yeah, we've got 3 countries going here. We've got, I'm in Canada. Keith?
I'm in the US, just north of New York City.
Lovely. I'm in Italy. So we are 6-9 hours time difference. So it's very, very global event, this one. So happy to be here and, talking with you. There's no agenda. There's no time scale. Perhaps we have to talk about half an hour. So at least we need to keep this as a limit. But I would start first and foremost to let you, Keith Bowie from Columbia University, from the DFSO, which is the Digital Financial Services Observatory, which is a grant of Bill Melinda Gates Foundation. So Keith, we'd be very happy if you can introduce yourself for our attendees.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Great to be here. My name is Keith Bowie. I've been in technology in various guises for more years than I care to remember, mainly in financial services and commodity trading organizations. I recently joined the DFSO, which is a Digital Financial Services Observatory, which is a project of the Columbia Institute for Teleinformation within the Columbia Business School in New York. So I've been there for about 18 months now. And the DFSO has been around for about 4.5 years and has been focusing on policy and technology and digital financial services in the developing world. So otherwise known as mobile money, which obviously relies very heavy on MNOs to provide the services to disadvantaged or underprivileged communities that have a difficulty accessing financial instruments due to whatever reasons. It could be gender, it could be caste, it could be a multitude of things. So we've been focusing on working with governments and central banks to introduce policy or work with them for policy. And most recently, we've developed a maturity-based cybersecurity risk management model for use in digital financial services in the developing world. And really, that's where I came to meet Tim. It was about a year ago when we had our last in-person conference. And so Tim and I Tim kind of gladly offered to be part of our kind of working groups and offer facilities that BlockCerts could have to take the project forward. And before I go further, I will apologise for my voice. I'll be very croaky, so hopefully I'll get through 30 minutes.
No, that's fine. So I think it's great that you mentioned this, and now we let Tim introduce himself, because we are here to inspire others to do something that perhaps has already been done by what you just described. And very happy to introduce Tim. So Tim and I have been working together for a period of time. So actually, I met Tim at Oxford University more than 2 years ago, when both me and him started to study blockchain, much more from a business model point of view rather than from a tech point of view. And since then, we have been done a few things together. But I let Tim to introduce himself, and then we discuss a little bit about something.
Thanks, Daniele and Keith. It's great to be able to work with both of these brilliant gentlemen. My name's Tim Vasco. I'm founder of BlockCerts Blockchain. BlockSearch was started as a project, as Daniele mentioned, with MIT and Oxford back, and we did some work with Microsoft. And the idea was to take blockchain into and smart contracts really into the mainstream, into real actual commercialization. We noticed, or I noticed back in 2014, 2015, long before Ethereum and blockchain and so forth had any impact, that there was this technology that was going to reshape the way business transactions were done. And up until maybe 2017, 2018, there's really not been a lot of commercializable projects. BlockSearch is a completely developed SaaS platform that takes 12 of the most important components that it would take to do transactions and builds it into a framework that everyday businesses can use. So I was excited when I started working with Keith because again, way back in the day in 2014, 2015, the DFSO started looking at what digital economics would be like, digital money and things like that, and what would be the safe way to create transactions, avoid fraud, enhance cybersecurity, things like that. So when we started working together, I said, well, you've got all the research and academic backing, and we've got the platform. Why don't we bring those together? So that's how we came together. And of course, Daniele and I, a few years ago, started working on the same thing, which is how do we get out of this concept of white paper blockchain into actual operable business models? And during that time, we formed Fusion, STX and Fusion Funder to reshape the way business models could capitalize, structure, and operate using a validated blockchain background. So that's what we've been doing for the last several years. It's an exciting journey. It's only just starting right now. We see a lot of crypto trading and things like that, and that's the really exciting stuff. We're the backbone of those kinds of things, and we believe it's the future of business.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to explain a little bit what DFSO and in a more little, without going too much in detail because we have a quite broad audience. So what is the value added in having the DFSO, which is, let's say, an academic institution, let me call it like this. There might be better terms to define, but at least anyone can understand. And a company, which is essentially a technology company, meeting together, and what is the value added they bring to the industry? Because here we're talking about two industries, and telco could be a third one, okay? So we're talking about technology and we're talking about finance. And telco, it's somehow at the intersection of the two, because it's both technology and also add a layer of finance. So how do you envisage kind of applying the same model to be extended to the telco industry?
So I think in broad terms, what I say is, you're right. So from an academic perspective, we're producing papers, we're producing all this theory, and it's all great. It's all great stuff, very interesting stuff. But from a practical perspective, working with Tim, he's got a visual platform there. So turning the theory into something that's usable by an end customer or an organization is got a lot of value. I think, as Tim said, we've done a ton of research. He's got a ton of technology. Marrying the two together, I think, gives you the best of both worlds. And I think Tim mentioned earlier, I'm a very practical person myself, right? So I like to see something, to make it work. So we've done this really cool framework, but it is literally words on a piece of paper. So working with Tim to turn it into something that's visual and interactive for the end user, I think is going to be a bit of a game changer. And to be honest with you, the folks that we've spoken to in Africa and Southeast Asia that gave us feedback on the framework, when we mentioned that we're looking to turn it into something that's more application-based or interactive, they were that's a game changer for us, right? So really, really looking forward to getting that moving.
Yeah, and I'll jump in on that, Keith. So the idea of the this device here, this is where transactions happen. The first thing people do, even if they've got a computer, and I'm sure we've all done it, even if you've got a computer sitting in front of you, you pick up your phone and you answer a text, or you maybe even do a search, and all of a sudden you're doing this, and you've got a big screen and keyboard in front of you. How many people haven't done that? So when we look at the actual way that telecommunications has reshaped how we deal with information, and that's now everything from entertainment to banking to our personal lives and our transactions, we actually are using a framework or a fabric with a multi-device world. I was looking at some statistics, and our use of computer screens has actually gone up during the pandemic. So our use of larger screen real estate and devices has gone up. Yet we're still very dependent on this framework and this network that keeps us connected. With that, we need user tools and we need transactional models that create ever more efficacy, safety, and reliability for this this transaction world we're in that's digital. And that's really where blockchain, block certs, and this DFSO framework come in, is to validate those types of transactions in a seamless flow.
Yeah, that's very nice. I think I'd like to go in probably a little bit more in detail on from two different perspectives, because both of them I think are interesting for the audience, which is one, and perhaps I can make a little introduction and to clarify some misconceptions of the word of blockchain as a whole, and eventually we can deep dive a little bit from a DeFi perspective or smart contract based economy perspective. So in fact, there are two items we would like to cover. One, it's regulation and compliance, and the other one, it's DeFi. And I think both of them are equally interesting because, especially into the telco industry, which is very centralized focus and obviously dominated by the telco operators plus the middlemen, so the operators or the service providers which are in between. Somehow this architecture might be reconfigured to really embrace a new growth trajectory as a whole. So let's start from the regulation and compliance. So from a blockchain perspective, if you want to start kind of a new business or new project in a blockchain, the first and foremost important is that, without going too much into detail what Bitcoin, what Ethereum is to understand what blockchain is. And essentially the blockchain, if we start from the bottom, is a settlement layer. People confuse the technology, which is the blockchain. Let's say Ethereum is an example of a blockchain, with the token, which is an asset which sits on top of the blockchain. Similarly, that in telco, you have the nodes which compose the network, and you might have assets on top, like a device, for example, okay, which sits onto the network itself. The blockchain, it's managed similarly, even though with different protocols and with different interoperability. What I do see is very interesting is how to ensure compliance and regulation into the telco industry by using the blockchain. Previously, I listened to a conversation about how to remove A2P fraud, so phishings, thanks to a kind of common ledger to remove the kind of who is authorized to receive messages being previously authorized. I think it's a very smart use of the blockchain. That is in India, by the way. And I think what I would like to cover right now is regulation and compliance a threat for people entering or embracing building a product or services on top of a blockchain? I would like to ask you, what is your kind of tips or suggestion for new players entering into the industry or thinking about building a new project? What are the common threats they have to address first, just to make sure they don't breach any applicable let's say, law or applicable compliance framework?
Well, let me just jump in real quick and kind of point this out. Keith and the DFSO has been at this for half a decade or more. So has BlockCerts. So the first thing I'll say is the reason we're here is so people don't have to think about that. The framework and what we're working on now is to deploy a tool set so that you've got embedded compliance. It's literally compliance on the fly. It's too complex. There are a tremendous amount of technical hurdles and a tremendous amount of regulatory knowledge bases that need to be embedded in every transaction. So you don't think about building that. If you want to build it, give yourself 5-7 years and a couple million man hours and go for it, because that's about what it took. And that's what it's taken. So,
and in between, technology has already changed, so you have to spend another 2 million.
Right. So the idea was to create something that happened a long time back, 5, 6, 7 years ago, and bring that to market today. It's really apparent now, since everything's digital, or these events are digital and so forth, that that's not going to go away. The second thing I'd say is people don't care. When they want to do a transaction, or a business wants to do a transaction, they want their contract. They want to know who their people are they're dealing with. They want to do it fast. They want to get the job done. So digital transactions, what we call smart contracts, are much more than a PDF and an email. And what we talk about with regulatory frameworks, which is what's exciting about the DFSO, is regulation on the fly. It's real-time regulation. Where, as opposed to being in a world where we go back and audit, oh, gee, that happened, it shouldn't have. What we have now is a framework that establishes what should happen as it goes forward, and maybe creates red flags or even blocks a transaction before it occurs in a non-compliant, illegal, or non-regulatory way. That's really where this is. Embed it right on the platform, right on the device, right on the application, and use the tool set. Keith, that's kind of my view.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And just maybe, a little bit more holistically, Daniele, if you look back in the, back 12, 13 years ago, when we had the financial crash in the late noughties, regulation was introduced that was, very prohibitive to, come up with a regulation, I guess, to try and calm the markets down. The smart companies took that regulation and used it as an innovation catalyst, rather than as a burden for technology. And those organizations are now thriving in many different areas. So that's my philosophy: is look at regulation, use it as something that you can benefit your company. The other thing would be understanding your regulators as well. So what kind of approach do they have? And many regulatory bodies now, central banks, have these things called regulatory sandboxes, where policymakers, technologists, fintechs, etc., can collaborate together to kind of shape the regulation so that it's workable for everybody. It's safe, but it's workable. And I think it's really, really important to, again, understand: does your regulator have one of these sandboxes? Can you get involved? How do you get involved? And then the approach of the regulator itself: are they kind of, are they very restrictive? Everything's no until, they get a bit more confidence, or is it like a wait and see? And there's very much a mixture of, if you look back in the kind of early days of blockchain, when regulators were starting to look at it, there was a real mixture of people, of the regulators, kind of taking different approaches across the globe, to actually being completely restrictive. No, you can't do that, shut everything down. And then they drip feed stuff on, to a more proactive approach where they kind of had a wait and see. And I guess maybe something goes wrong, they take action. And now the kind of regulators are coming towards a common consensus, I think, on how to approach these kind of new technologies and problems.
Exactly.
And do you think? Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Back to what Keith was saying. It's about that framework approach. It's about creating this environment where now you can lift up all this structure, and whether you're a regulator, a telco, a bank, a small business, a medium-sized business, you can actually innovate your approach to the digital market on top of a framework. You don't have to invent the framework. A lot of that work's been done. You can leverage that into new models that really allow you to accelerate the change management and the opportunity in a digital marketplace. That's really what this is about. So it's important to look at platform and framework versus business model. Business model is innovation on top of that. The platform and framework enables that. Think of the App Store and what app stores did for software and mobile computing and device management. That's the same. That's a framework and a platform.
Cool. So let's build something new that did not exist before. So as you know, there is DeFi, so decentralized finance. Now let's try to make an exercise and build a DT, which is decentralized telco. So if we want to build this, we want to provide practical tools to our audience. Let's say we want to have an infrastructure which is driven by smart contracts. Smart contracts essentially are little piece of code which are publicly audited by an open network, okay, of people that audit the execution of this piece of code over a blockchain, okay? So now if telco would like to embrace these kind of decentralized approach, because for example, in finance, there are middlemen which have been cut out by the transactions. For example, the clearinghouse into the decentralized finance, the clearinghouse, they do no longer exist because the settlement is done among the two parties with no intermediaries in between. Similarly, in telco, if you think about interconnection and roaming, there are obviously several middlemen while a transaction is being done, a transaction, a call, an SMS, or whatever transaction is in between. How do you imagine transformation of telco in a much more decentralized fashion? How do you imagine this infrastructure to work?
Well, the idea of centralized is being attacked globally. I mean, the idea of data centralization, and centralized affects two things. It affects privacy and security, and it affects cost. And every time there is a middleman or an authority, we both lose privacy and security, we lose streamability, and we add a layer of cost. So it's a natural transition to talk about decentralized. I want to say decentralized doesn't mean deregulated either. That's why we talk about the framework. But people get that. So we're not talking about anarchy here. We're talking about efficiency. Okay?
Yeah.
So the way I envision a telco going from the idea of a centralized kind of series of middlemen to a decentralized is to use blockchain as it's intended. And blockchain is largely misunderstood as to what it does. It actually, the most effective use of blockchain is the fact that these hashes are unique and that they can easily match up with each other. So we can have this massive tracking mechanism without fail and without duplication. That's what the most effective use of blockchain is. That's what makes Bitcoin possible, is it's unique. So now that we do that, we need to start thinking. There's actually a question here about how do we see the perspective of failures associated with scale and complexity. It's very easy. Simplify the transaction, simplify the complexity of that connection. Don't do all the mining and staking and all these things. Just use it to make the connection, and all of a sudden you've got a seamless, fast transaction that's easily that's easily connected, transferred, and all those other things can happen on the back end. That's really where you start dealing with this hybrid idea of what a centralized kind of business should do and what should be automated. So it's not an either or. And up to this point in blockchain, it's always been an either or. We have to do everything as an autonomous organization. Well, that didn't work either, right?
So, and blockchain is a layered architecture. I'm repeating all the time the same. So it's a layered architecture, and people confuse blockchain with cryptocurrencies. Okay, blockchain is not a cryptocurrency. Ethereum is not a currency. Bitcoin is not a currency, but so Bitcoin is a digital asset, store of value, store of wealth, whatever it is, but it's a digital asset on top of a blockchain, just Bitcoin blockchain. But there is a token, which is called Bitcoin or BTC, which is the native token of that blockchain. Similarly, onto Ethereum, it happens exactly the same. On Ethereum, you have ETH. So first of all, there's no currencies except the stable coin, USDT, USDC, and all the others, which somehow function as a currencies on top of a blockchain. That's step number one. Step number two, when it comes down to scalability and complexity, there's no problem of scalability because blockchain works on different layers. And for example, for people familiar with the layer 2 on top of Ethereum, there are several protocols which have been developed and underdeveloped. In Bitcoin, it's called Lightning Network, which will rise up the speed of a transaction up to thousands and thousands per second. So right now, there's no complexity on the layered protocols sitting on a blockchain, being Ethereum, Bitcoin, whatever. So the scaling up, there's absolutely no problem. Absolutely no problem now and forever. And in terms of complexity, it is true. There are 7,000 cryptocurrencies and digital assets right now being established, but perhaps I know 3, 4, 5, I'm a macro guy. So I follow and I'm trying to focus on those that make sense from a day-by-day perspective. I don't follow anything. So complexity, complexity, it's part of the nature of humankind. But I think if you follow the top 3, 4, 5 assets or protocols in the space, don't need to have too much complexity to understand. What do you think, Keith?
Yeah, no, I agree. And maybe going back to your kind of telecom example or question. I mean, there's a lot of use cases I think that the telecom companies could take blockchain and put it into practice. And back at the very end of the previous panel, when we were in the green room, they were mentioning partnership and collaboration. So maybe working with the various MNOs across Europe, for example, working together to sort out things like roaming and settlements, or some of their SLAs that they provide now their customers or companies. All of that sitting on something like a blockchain would give instantaneous A, metrics, and B, answers to questions that typically, you go to a call center, you have to have someone pick the phone and call you back because there's a whole bunch of areas they have to go into. It would be instantaneous, things like, SIM card registration or no call lists. There's a whole ton of use cases there that can be used, I think, across all the MNOs or telco operators that work in a partnership. They could actually take it forward and actually influence potentially the regulators to actually let them implement this across their ecosystems.
Yeah, and as we implement that, Keith, as you know, we'll put in machine learning, AI, that will eliminate a lot of the complexity and speed. And it reminds me of like when telcos first started, phone calls always got dropped, right? So, so there is going to be this evolution that will streamline all of this, very much so. And the frameworks exist. I mean, there's no question it's here. It's just a matter of how you're going to model that, again, back into the business case. What makes the most sense to address, and the speed is not an issue.
Absolutely, 100% agreed. We have another question. If you would like, you can answer, which is, hi, Daniel, a question from a slightly more practical view. You touched on a decentralized telco. So where do you and your panelists see the most benefit for using blockchain within telco? You guys want to answer?
Yeah, I think that the most advantageous place to put a blockchain in is right into the network where the device can make a call to the blockchain. So the closer you get it to these devices, similar to 2FA, but you enhance your 2FA model so that's embedded right in the device. If I was a telco, I would immediately have a blockchain generation model right within my network that devices could call. As soon as you do that, you're now able to start this tracking mechanism, and you're able to build business models on top of it. Regulatory based business models, streamline cost and frameworks, service your customers better. I went into T-Mobile in the United States and had to do all of these paper contracts. They said, "Would you like a copy?" I said, "Yeah." They said, "Well, we can't email it, but let us print you a copy." I mean, this is where the telco industry is on the back office. So dealing with it is right up front and saying, look, this technology is here. We need to get it into our network. That's where you start. And then you just pick apart, well, where are your cost centers? Just do it from a business perspective. Where are your cost centers? Where are your inefficiencies? How can we be more structured? I think the biggest thing people misunderstand is a smart contract is everything from communication to actually getting a signature and a payment. It's everything. It's all of those. So you embed it in your network and you've got the perfect smart contract execution device right here. This is it. Signed, done, everything's tracked. That's where I would start.
Yeah, I'd agree with Tim on that, and also then that just gives you've got the information there to put in, some of the use cases I mentioned previously, or whatever else floats your boat. So
yeah, it becomes, as soon as you put the framework together and you just get a strategic framework in place, as you point out, Keith, business models abound, like business opportunities and innovation abound.
Yeah, smart contracts, what you want to make of it, right? It's just it's a logic document. So you do what you want with it. What's your business problem? You solve it.
Yep.
So if someone is going to use the DT or D-Telco to SMP, the royalty,
yeah.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, guys. I think we're running out of time. So there will be an award session right now. I want to thank you very much for your time and your kind attendance here. Hopefully our guests have enjoyed our session. So thank you very much again for your time and contribution.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. See you, Tim. Thanks.
Appreciate it.